to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd.
Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack.
I don't care if we...
In baseball, spring training brings old and new players together to shake off winter's chill and once again step onto the pitcher's mound and into the batter's box. During the war, in the first years of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, spring training was held at Wrigley Field. But after the war was over, the league went south, just as the Major League ball players did.
The Cuba trip, I really believe, was done through connections with Branch Rickey, and of course 47 was the first year that Jackie Robinson could play, and they didn't want to go to the South with him because they knew there would be problems because of segregation, integration, that sort of thing. And so the Dodgers went to Cuba. Well, Branch Rickey and Philip Wrigley, had joined together to start the league. And then there was Max Carey, who was a good friend of Branch Rickey, and I think they kind of, collaborated on, that spring training in Cuba, even with the flight expenses, would be cheaper than in the South. They captured the fans there in Cuba, and so it was natural for the Cuban baseball public to come out and watch the girls play.
The Dodgers left Havana and returned to Brooklyn, where Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball on April 15, 1947. 3 days later, the All-Americans arrived in Cuba. They would outdraw the Dodgers throughout their training. Why?
Because we're women in skirts playing ball.
In November, I received a letter from Mr. Carey that says we're going to Havana, Cuba for spring training, and we would like for Dolores to be one of a few girls that we asked. There was another girl from Mobile. Her name was Margie Hogerson, and she also tried out in 1946 and was selected and she pitched for the Rockford Peaches. Over that winter, Mr. Carey sent her out to meet me and to meet my parents. And then it was time for spring training to be in April, and I'm in school. Now I've got to quit school in order to go to Havana, Cuba. So Margie was my chaperone, and we went by train to Havana. First we went to Miami, where we met up with all the girls from everywhere else, and then we flew over to Havana.
We trained at the University of Havana's facilities, huge facilities.
When we had spring training, the whole league would train together. It was not an individual team.
In spring training, you're doing everything. You're doing the exercise, the calisthenic approach to things. At that particular time, they didn't think girls ought to have weights or be in weight rooms. That all came much later. Calisthenics exercises, running, sprints, exercise, spring, your infield training, and that type of thing.
My room was on the 6th floor, and we were not allowed to take the elevators. So I'm crawling up the steps, 6 flights, because in spring training, the back of your legs get so sore, and I had no trouble losing 20 pounds in 2 weeks in the spring training. It was just automatic, because that's all you did, is play ball, lots of exercise.
Why wouldn't they let you use the elevator?
Because you're in spring training, you're supposed to walk. Anything, they always wanted us to do it the hard way.
Got to Cuba, then we went through the training, and it was quite a converting over from softball, the base lengths and everything being different, and the pitching. But I liked it. We adjusted.
Although league players in 1947 still trained with an underhand pitch, the rules they played by were the same as baseball. Wrigley had made that decision from the beginning of the league in 1943.
The rules of play were those of baseball, because he thought that baseball was a better spectator sport than softball because there was more pitching, there was leading off and stealing. And although the base paths and pitching distance were shorter than baseball's regulation field, they used baseball bats. All players used gloves, which was not the case with softball at the time. There were 9 fielders instead of 10, which were common to softball at the time.
It's another ball game. It's another country.
But it wasn't just another country. It was Cuba. As reporter Sam Lacey said when visiting Cuba to report on Jackie Robinson's spring training with the Dodgers, I heard the Cubans were a deeply religious people. I have learned that baseball is their religion.
According to the reports, they were waiting for the girls. And we packed the stands every night. They loved to watch us play, practice. And in the games, they'd be walking around in the stands with the roll of money making bets.
They'd follow us around. Oh my goodness. I got pictures you should see. I mean, it was like playing a game. I mean, they'd sit up there in the bleachers, follow us outside the gate. It was fun.
They went wild over the women. We had 25,000 people. They said, baseball femenino, they're over there, they're watching the women. And we had to be escorted to the ballpark because those crazy, they love blondes. Oh man, they love blondes. And you had to hang on. We had to have the security people escort us to the game, to the ballpark, because they would steal your glove or anything.
So we get into Cuba and we trained there. It was hot, and we trained there very hard for 2 weeks. And when they saw how well we played, they couldn't believe it. Dottie Kamashak, who was the first baseman for Rockford Peaches, they said if she had been a man, they would have offered her $50,000 on the spot.
It was fun. They called us Amazons, because the girls over there are very, very frail, very feminine, and here we are, tough, throwing like 16-pound bowling balls, and they throw that little tiny thing, and out there playing ball like men, they just couldn't believe it.
As frail as they may have appeared to the Americans, Cuban women did play baseball. The All-Americans played exhibition games with them and recruited some players into the league.
And the people were very, very interested in the girls. And the league picked up 9 Cuban girls to play in our league.
In 1947, when they went spring training, and we had exhibition game. And to let you know, I pitched on one game. I did very well. That's what my mother told me. She was at the game. That's the first time my mother saw me playing. That's when they decided they were going to bring 4 Cubans to the United States. Yeah, the Cuban manager said, you're going to be next.
While Americans and Cubans shared a love of baseball, Cuba was a very different culture. Responses to that culture varied considerably among these young women, most of whom had never been far from their homes.
One of the interesting things to me was there were only 2 stoplights in the whole city, and the congestion of traffic. The sidewalks are about half the size of the sidewalks we think of them, and the buildings were built right up to the corners.
They didn't have traffic lights. Whoever got to the corner beeped their horn first, they had the right of way.
Being in the hotel and walking on the streets, you had to be with somebody all the time. And then we had Mayday over there, and you couldn't go out of the hotel, because it was just too dangerous,
There were people riding around in Jeeps with guns, which was very different. This was before the overthrow of government, and we were not allowed to go out by ourselves. We went in groups.
And I can remember one day they told us to bring sandwiches into the hotel because we were not going to practice or go out the next day because the army was walking down the street. And I can remember it was scary.
It was kind of comical. I have a picture of it. We had a long rope that went down from like the 3rd floor, and it had a basket on it. And we would lower that, and these guys downstairs would go and get us some Cokes, and then we'd pull it up. I wasn't too crazy about the food over there, so I learned to say leche, and that's milk. So at lunchtime they had ham sandwiches always, good old American, you know, with milk. So I kind of like that, but that fried bananas and powdered eggs and stuff, I didn't go too much for.
They had real good coconut ice cream and fresh pineapple they sold on the streets. It was a real experience in this, and it didn't have any water to drink. It was always Coca-Cola.
The food was not edible as far as I was concerned. I lived on pineapples that they sold on the street corner.
There was music 24 hours a day in Cuba, and it was just wonderful. Music is something that's very important to me, and I loved it. We were taken to eat at one of the hotels all the time, and the food was terrible. So most of us ate at Sloppy Joe's, the bar between our hotel and the hotel where they fed us. After practice, we generally showered, went back to the hotel, showered, changed clothes, and we hired a taxi, and he would come and pick us up and take us all over Havana and make sure that if we got thirsty, we would have a cerveza.
Bacardi opened up their bar that was the longest bar I've ever seen in my life. And we had one of our leading pitchers was not a drinker. And I wanted to go to Sloppy Joe's. I'd always heard about Sloppy Joe's, and I really wanted to go. And we were going there after we ate. And they took us by Bacardi's and this leading pitcher who was not a drinker. And she was so out of it that somebody had to take her back, and I volunteered. I never saw Sloppy Joe's. We wanted there to put on an exhibition game in Cuba. But I got awfully tired of the Cubans following us around singing and all, you know. I was hungry for American music.
Havana itself was a beautiful place. It was very difficult to walk around some parts of the city, but then they had great plazas that I did like to go down. And we got to go into the Capitol building itself and do some touring. The spring training in Havana in '47 was a highlight for me. And as I look back, I just had a uniform and I could go on the field and I could play and do what I love to do.